They say betrayal always comes from the ones you trust the most. I never thought I'd be the one saying this, but my story is proof of how true that is. I thought I had the perfect marriage, a loving wife, a stable life, and dreams of growing old together. But all of that came crashing down on one unforgettable night. It started like any other day. I was at work, focused on meeting deadlines, when one of my colleagues approached me with an invitation. He insisted I join him at a wedding party that evening. I hesitated at first, thinking I'd rather spend the night at home, but something, call it fate, instinct, or sheer coincidence, pushed me to say yes. Little did I know that decision would change everything. When we arrived at the party, I wasn't expecting anything extraordinary. I scanned the room casually, enjoying the lively atmosphere, until my eyes landed on a sight that froze me in place. There she was, my wife. But she wasn't sitting alone. She was nestled comfortably in the arms of another man, laughing and leaning into him as if they were the only ones in the room. At that moment, my world stopped. She didn't see me. She didn't even know I was there. My colleague nudged me, asking if I was okay. I couldn't respond. All I could do was stare at the woman I thought I knew, watching her betray me so openly. Standing there, watching my wife in the arms of another man, I felt a mix of emotions that's hard to put into words. Anger, disbelief, humiliation, it all hit me like a tidal wave. My heart raced and my hands clenched into fists as I struggled to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just some casual conversation or innocent gesture. Her body language, the way she leaned into him, and the sheer intimacy of their moment screamed something much deeper. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I didn't want to make a scene without knowing the full extent of what was happening. Instead, I turned to my colleague, my voice shaking as I whispered, "Go over there. Talk to her. See what's going on." At first, he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea, but seeing the desperation in my eyes, he finally nodded. I stood at a distance, watching as he approached their table. My wife still hadn't noticed me. She was too engrossed in her lover, smiling in a way I hadn't seen her smile at me in years. I stayed hidden, my breath shallow, as my colleague go there and sat beside them. What he overheard next shattered me completely. My wife laughed, and talking to him, she looked at her lover, her eyes sparkling. She said, I don't feel this way with my husband. He's just boring. I don't even know why I married him." She added more, "I didn't enjoy my husband's sex that I got from you, especially in kneeling position. You are really strong, and I really need that. We're enjoying his money. We're just using his money to enjoy life with you. It's different. You give me what I really need." Her lover smirked, leaning closer. "And he doesn't suspect a thing?" "Not at all," she said confidently, taking a sip of her drink. "He's too naive to ever figure it out." Those words pierced through me like a knife. My fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Every sacrifice I had made for her, every ounce of love and trust felt like a cruel joke. I wanted to storm over and confront her right then and there, but I held back. Something inside me told me to wait, to gather myself, and think this through. As I stood there, trembling with rage and disbelief, I decided it was time to step into the spotlight. But I wasn't going to just walk over and confront her. No. She needed to feel the same humiliation she had just thrown at me. I whispered to my colleague, "Stay close. Things are about to get interesting." I walked toward their table, my heart pounding, every step feeling heavier than the last. As I got closer, my wife's laughter rang in my ears, carefree, oblivious to the storm about to hit her. Finally, I stopped just a few feet away and cleared my throat loudly. The sound startled her. She turned to look at me, and in that split second, I saw her entire demeanor change. Her smile vanished, replaced by wide-eyed shock and sheer panic. The man beside her froze too, his hand still resting casually on her shoulder. "Enjoying the party?" I said, my voice calm but dripping with sarcasm. She stammered, I didn't know you'd be here." "Clearly," I replied, glancing pointedly at her lover. Seems like you're having a great time with, what should I call him? Your dance partner? Or something more fitting? The room grew quieter as heads turned toward us. Guests began whispering, and the tension became palpable. My wife tried to regain composure, her face flushed. "It's not what it looks like," she muttered, but the words sounded hollow even to her. I turned to her lover. "And you are?" Before he could answer, I noticed a sudden shift in his expression, nervousness, guilt, and something else. He looked familiar. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just any man. He was someone I had met before, someone who worked in the same building as me, a colleague. I turned back to my wife, my voice rising. "You've been cheating on me with someone from my own workplace? How bold of you!" Her face turned pale, and she tried to speak, but I didn't let her. "Do you think I'm blind, deaf, or just stupid? All this time I trusted you, and this is what you've been doing behind my back?" By now, everyone at the party was watching. People were murmuring, pointing, and exchanging shocked glances. My wife's lover, clearly embarrassed, tried to slip away, but I stepped in his path. "Not so fast," I said coldly. "You're not going anywhere. Everyone here deserves to know what kind of people you two are." But then came the twist I hadn't anticipated. One of the guests, an older gentleman I didn't recognize, stepped forward and said, "I think there's more to this story." He handed me his phone, showing me a video he had recorded just moments ago. My wife and her lover, locked in an intimate embrace, saying things even worse than what my colleague had overheard. I looked at my wife, my voice filled with icy determination. "This party is over. For you. You can explain yourself to the divorce lawyer. And as for you," I turned to her lover, "you'll be hearing from HR soon. Enjoy your last paycheck." After the shocking confrontation at the party, I couldn't shake the anger and betrayal that coursed through me. I knew the next steps had to be calculated. It was time to expose the full truth, not just to my wife, but to everyone who had ever been a part of this web of lies. The world needed to know what kind of people they were dealing with. The following day, I filed for divorce. The legal papers went through quickly, and I made sure to include everything: her infidelity, the way she had humiliated me, and the extent of the deceit. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to make sure that the people involved faced real consequences. Her lover worked at the same company as I did, and now I saw an opportunity to ensure he didn't get away with his actions either. I had never suspected that things had gone so far. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep their affair really went. It wasn't just a few casual meetings. They had been carrying on behind my back for months, probably even longer. It was during one of my business trips that I first noticed something off. My wife started taking long, personal calls at odd hours, and when I'd ask about it, she'd brush me off with vague excuses. I knew something wasn't right, but I had no evidence. It wasn't until after the party, when I went through her phone records and social media messages, that I found everything I needed. I uncovered a series of texts and pictures that made my stomach turn. They weren't just messages between a lover and a partner. They were intimate, passionate exchanges that made it clear they were involved in every way. They even discussed their plans to travel together, leaving me behind as the fool. I found a particularly damning message from her lover, sent just a few weeks before the party. He said, "I can't wait for our getaway. I've never felt this alive with anyone else. Your husband has no idea what we've been doing behind his back, does he?" And then, the most devastating message of all, my wife had responded, "He's clueless. He doesn't even notice when I'm with you. I haven't felt this alive in years. He's too boring in bed, and the money's all I really need from him. With you, I'm finally getting what I deserve." I couldn't believe it. I had been living a lie for so long, trusting her, loving her, while she was planning her escape with another man. The betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. The nights she said she was out with friends, that was just an excuse to meet him. The times she claimed to be working late, that was when they were together, laughing and enjoying each other's company, while I sat at home, none the wiser. The weight of the betrayal felt like a mountain on my chest. How could she do this to me? How could she throw everything we built away for some fleeting affair? But I wasn't going to sit back and let them get away with it. I took the evidence to my lawyer, ensuring they had every bit of text, picture, and record that proved the affair wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern. I also contacted HR at my company, sending them a copy of the video that had been recorded at the party, along with all the other proof I had uncovered. Her lover was going to face the consequences of his actions, just as she would. But the most heart-wrenching part was watching my wife's reaction when she realized I knew everything. She didn't even apologize. Instead, she tried to deny it all, claiming the affair was just a moment of weakness, a temporary lapse in judgment. But it was too late. I had already seen through her lies. The divorce went through quickly, and as part of the settlement, I made sure I was rid of her, for good. My lawyer ensured she had no claim to my assets, and I made sure her lover's career was ruined as well. Both of them were left with nothing. I thought that would be the end of it, but the truth is, the pain of betrayal lingers. Every time I look back at what happened, I still can't believe I was so blind. But the one thing I'm grateful for is that I didn't let them get away with it. The confrontation at the party was only the beginning, but the aftermath felt like a storm that would never pass. As the days went on, my mind couldn't shake the images of my wife laughing in his arms, of her whispering sweet words to him, words I thought were meant for me. The party had been the tipping point, but what followed was far worse than I could have imagined. I remember sitting in my car, staring at my phone in disbelief. My wife's text messages, her social media, they all told a story of betrayal so deep it felt like a knife in my gut. Yet, it was a knife I had to remove myself. The more I read, the more I realized I wasn't just dealing with a one-time mistake or an affair. I was dealing with a full-on deception that had been going on for months, maybe even longer. What hurt the most was not just the affair itself, but the way she had lied to me. To my face over and over again. She had said all the right things. I love you. You're my one and only. I'm so lucky to have you. But behind those words, she was living a completely different life, one that had nothing to do with me. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. How many times had I believed her when she said she was working late or out with friends? Each time she came home late, smelling of someone else's cologne, I ignored the signs. I had been so wrapped up in my own life, my own world, that I didn't notice the slow destruction of our marriage until it was too late. But the most haunting part of it all was the way she spoke about me to her lover. The messages were raw, brutal. "He's just a paycheck to me now," she had said. "He's so boring in bed. I can't remember the last time we actually connected. You give me everything he never could." And then I found it. The message that sent a chill down my spine. The one where she made it clear that she had been using me from the start. "He's just good for the money. That's it. I don't even care anymore. You're the one who makes me feel alive." I felt sick to my stomach. All those years, all those moments, all the love I had given her, they had all been a lie. How could she? How could someone I trusted with everything, my heart, my future, do this to me? But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. The rage in me wasn't something I could control. I had to think this through. I needed a plan. I needed to expose her completely. This wasn't going to end quietly. She had done her worst, but I would make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. Every single message, every phone call. I even took pictures of the photos she had exchanged with him, private moments that she would never have wanted anyone to see. But the hardest part wasn't finding the evidence. It was realizing how far they had gone. I discovered they had been meeting at hotels, sneaking away on weekends, even planning trips together. The worst part? She had planned a secret vacation with him just weeks before the party, something she had hidden from me. As I looked at the photos they had taken, I could feel my chest tightening with rage. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing everything she had tried to hide from me. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. And as for him, the man who had betrayed me in my own workplace, he wasn't going to escape unscathed either. The day I confronted her was like no other. As I walked into our house, I could already feel the tension in the air. She was sitting in the living room, trying to act normal, pretending nothing had changed. But I knew better. I had all the proof, and I wasn't going to keep it to myself. I walked up to her and said nothing at first. I just showed her the pictures, the messages, the video that my colleague had captured. Her face drained of color, and I watched as her entire world collapsed in front of her. "Do you really think I didn't know?" I asked, my voice steady, but filled with years of hurt. "Do you think I'm that stupid?" Her eyes darted nervously, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The realization of what she had done hit her in a way nothing else could. But then came the most unexpected moment. The moment that turned everything upside down. She didn't beg for forgiveness, didn't cry, didn't show even an ounce of regret. Instead, she said something that shook me to my core. "You always thought you were the good husband, the perfect man. But you never really saw me. You never really saw what I needed. I've been suffocating with you for years." Her words were cold, and they cut deeper than anything else. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't remorseful. She had already checked out, and in her mind, this affair was just a natural consequence of our marriage falling apart. That was the moment I realized there was no turning back. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about a person who had stopped loving me long before I ever knew. And that's when the rage came. The rage I had been holding back. The one that had been brewing since the moment I found out. After the confrontation, everything felt like it had shattered beyond repair. The woman I thought I knew, the wife I had built a life with, was no longer the person I saw before me. As she stood there, trying to justify her actions with a coldness that pierced right through me, the weight of the betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the false promises. It was about the person I thought I could trust with my life, but who had been deceiving me all along. I couldn't just walk away from this. I had to make sure that not only would she face the consequences of what she had done, but so would he. Her lover, my so-called friend, had crossed a line that was unforgivable. He had betrayed my trust in ways I never thought possible, and he was going to pay for it. I started with the legal route. I hired a lawyer. I filed for divorce, and I made sure that every step of the process would leave her with no room to hide. I was done playing nice. I was done being the understanding husband who let her make excuses. No, this time, I was fighting back with everything I had. When it came to the division of assets, I left no stone unturned. Our house, our savings, the joint accounts, everything was up for grabs. I knew I had every right to fight for what was mine, and she was going to pay for all the pain she had caused me. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about showing her that her actions had consequences. But it didn't stop there. I knew I had to hit them where it would hurt the most. Her lover, my so-called friend, wasn't going to get away unscathed either. I started digging into his life, his business, his relationships. I found out things that he would have never wanted anyone to know. I made sure his reputation took a massive hit. I contacted some of his business associates and made sure they knew exactly what kind of person he was. I made sure his career was as damaged as my marriage had been. As for her, The emotional toll of the divorce weighed heavily on her. She had tried to move on with him, but I could see how it crumbled beneath her. She thought she could get away with everything. She thought she could betray me without facing the consequences. But I had made sure she realized that no one gets away without paying for their actions. She tried to put on a brave face, but it was clear she was unraveling. The once confident woman who had openly flaunted her affair was now broken. She called me a few times, begging for forgiveness, but I had no sympathy left for her. There was no way back for us. No rebuilding what we once had. The trust was gone, and I couldn't look at her without feeling disgusted by what she had done. One evening, I ran into her at a cafe. She was with him, sitting across the table, trying to pretend like everything was fine. I watched them for a moment, watching them laugh and smile, but it felt like a sickening charade. She noticed me staring, and for a split second, her smile faltered. She could feel the weight of what she had lost, and she knew that it was too late to turn back. I walked up to their table, not caring about the looks we were getting from the people around us. "You think this is going to work out?" I asked, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. "You think you've won?" Her lover looked up at me, his face pale. He clearly knew I was the one who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, but he didn't dare say anything. "This is just the beginning," I said, turning away without waiting for a response. "You both think you're happy now, but mark my words, you'll never have peace." It was in that moment that I realized how much power I had over the situation. The emotional toll had been heavy, but I was finally in control. The rage had burned itself out, replaced by a cold, calculated sense of justice. I wasn't just moving on from this. I was making sure they couldn't ever forget what they did to me. As time passed, the anger and hurt I had carried with me began to settle. The divorce was finalized. The legal battles were over, and the emotional weight I had carried for so long was starting to lift. But even though the pain had started to fade, the scars remained. The betrayal from my wife, from my best friend, had changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't the same person I was before the affair had shattered everything. At first, the silence in my house was deafening. I had spent years living with someone I thought I knew, sharing a life, building memories. Now there was nothing, just emptiness. I had to find a way to fill that space, not with anger or revenge, but with something more meaningful. I realized that revenge, no matter how satisfying in the moment, was never going to be enough to heal the wounds in my heart. It was difficult to let go of the resentment, especially after everything I had done to make them pay. But I knew that continuing to hold on to that pain would only keep me trapped in the past. I couldn't move forward while I was still chained to the betrayal. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life. I focused on my career, spending more time on the things that brought me peace, and reconnecting with friends and family who had stood by me. The most important step in my healing was letting go of the anger. I spent hours reflecting on everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it. I realized that holding on to my hatred for her and her lover was only hurting me. It was time to forgive, not for their sake, but for mine. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I responded to it. It wasn't easy. There were days when I still thought about the lies she had told me, about how she had taken me for granted, about how I had been made to feel worthless in the eyes of the one person I had trusted with everything. But with time, the bitterness faded. I understood that her choices were hers to make, and the life she chose to live without me was not my problem anymore. I began dating again. I wasn't looking for a replacement for her, but I was looking for someone who could show me what love and respect really looked like. Someone who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. It wasn't about rushing into another relationship, but about taking things slow, learning to trust again, and most importantly, learning to love myself. The day I realized I had finally forgiven her, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't about excusing her actions, it was about freeing myself from the hold her betrayal had over me. I could never forget what had happened, but I didn't need to let it define me anymore. And so, my life moved forward. I found peace. It took time, but it was worth it. I was no longer consumed by thoughts of revenge, nor was I stuck in the past. I had taken control of my future, and I had learned to trust again, this time in myself. As for her and her lover, they remained a distant chapter in my past. I never heard from her again, and honestly, I didn't want to. I had given them enough of my time and energy. It was time to move on, and I did. I found happiness in places I hadn't expected. Life, after all, doesn't stop for anyone, and it's up to us to decide whether we let it break us or let it lead us to something better. Looking back, I can't say I regret what happened. It taught me valuable lessons about trust, love, and resilience. I'll never forget the pain or the betrayal, but I don't let it control my life anymore. I don't let my past define my future. I now know that the most important thing I could have done was to take control of my own happiness and start a new chapter on my own terms. This was my journey. From heartbreak to revenge to healing, it was a road full of twists and turns. But in the end, I came out stronger, wiser, and with a renewed sense of who I am.